Welcome to Emotions and Eating with Nicola Beer. Nicola controlled her feelings using food for 25 years, so she knows how draining it is to be constantly thinking about or acting out with food. Thankfully, having made an amazing breakthrough in her recovery, her mission became about helping others escape the unsatisfying cycle of frustration and self-medication with food. Nicola is determined to help you find your inner strength so you can be healthy, gain confidence, feel great, and be at peace with yourself and food.
All right, Nicola, welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. How are we doing today, my friend?
I'm excellent, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, dialing in all the way from Dubai. This is a first for the podcast, so very excited to connect. And you are somebody that I've grown to be a quick fan of because I knew instantly when I got your information put in front of me, I was like, her info is really going to be able to help my audience. She must come on the show. And so I'm glad that we're making this happen. Now, I kind of want to, you have had a really interesting relationship with food. You've traveled a long journey with that relationship with food. So I kind of wanted to start there and have you tell us a little bit about how that perspective on food, how your relationship with food and eating has changed over the years and how you've gotten to the point where you're at right now.
Sure, absolutely. So my relationship with food really started in my childhood. I grew up, my mum had 5 children, so I'm one of 5, and she was very stressed and she was physically and emotionally abusive. And I took this as a sign of there's something wrong with me, my self-esteem was low, and I started to use food, and I realised I could use food to sort of cope and to stuff these emotions. So as early as I can remember, I remember running down the stairs and filling my school jumper with lots of sweets and cakes, and then running back upstairs and eating it all. And then I went through other times when my parents, they got divorced when I was 13, and my dad went, and my mum, bless her, she was finding it even harder to cope. I then started to use food to sometimes not eat as a punishment, and then as a reward eating. So from a very early age, my eating was kind of messed up. And then when I was 14, I remember going round to one of my friend's sleepovers for her birthday. So it was girls sleeping over and watching movies and eating ice cream. And this girl handed us all a laxative, and they were talking about being sick. And then I thought, wow, this is great. This means that I can just literally eat whatever I want. And obviously, it was just an absolute disaster. And then from then on, I was overeating throughout my college years. And then in my first year of university, I met a girl who was lovely, and she liked to spend hours and hours getting ready in front of the mirror, and I couldn't think of doing anything worse. Give me 10 minutes and then, I'm done. But she liked doing this whole 3-hour ritual going out, and she could see that how much I was really struggling to look at myself in the mirror and feel happy going out. And it was then that she said, I was 19 at the time, and she said, what we need to do is you just need to come on a diet with me. We need to sort out your hair, and you can then, if you go on a diet, then you can wear some of my clothes. And I just took that as, okay, I'm not acceptable as I am. And yes, I was slightly overweight, but to have that experience, then it just really, I went crazy the other way. So then for many years, I just starved myself. And I did get attention, but then this made it worse, because then I thought, okay, I'm only acceptable being this unrealistically small weight. And as I got older, when I'd go through crises, it was then that I started to really pile on the weight. So when the financial crisis hit, I just moved to Dubai, and I took on a new job, and I was so scared of losing my job that every night I decided that I deserved to make myself a cake. And so then for all the time, literally for months and months and months, I would make myself a cake, eat the whole cake, sometimes be sick, sometimes not. And then the next day I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, right, I'm not going to eat a cake again. And then by halfway through the day, I just tell myself I deserve it and that dreaded I'll start tomorrow, I'll change tomorrow happened. And I was just caught in this cycle of really wanting to change, hating myself, not loving myself enough to change, and feeling the guilt, eating feeling the guilt, eating feeling the guilt. And my life was obsessed about food. I'd think about food all the time, whether I was on a starvation mode, whether I was on a binging mode, and sometimes I was, bulimic, and it's the worst thing in the world because you just feel so dehydrated and, you really hate yourself. Well, for me, I really hate myself even more than the binging or the starving. So it was a long journey. And then thankfully, I started really doing lots of different methods of retraining my mind, hypnotherapy, loving my body, doing some emotional body work, doing some advanced counselling, and really learn how to love myself. And this was a main thing that really transformed all of my eating. Loving myself in the way I treat myself, learning to love my body, and there's actions I can talk about that if you're interested. And then also finding new ways of coping with the emotions, coping with the fear, then feelings of not feeling good enough, the stress from work, the stress from my family, so that I was dealing with that rather than using food to cope with that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people struggle with those things. Nicola, what would you say was the first thing that you did? What was that first baby step that started to shift your momentum, where you started to reclaim control over your relationship with food?
I'd say one of the first was doing regular exercise every day. Not intense exercise, but something for me. Because when I started to release the stress and the tension and the emotions from my body, so it would either be walking or swimming or yoga, I found that I was finding a new way to deal with these emotions that I had. Because before that, I'd feel stressed, I'd feel anxious, and I would just either eat through it or be thinking about planning eating around it and not actually doing anything for myself. And I found actually moving the body, you can move sort of the emotions through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just that emotional outlet, that's something different than, like you said, binging or withholding food. Do you remember like the first time that you felt like, wow, I'm actually in control, or that first moment when you decided to make a good decision versus a not so good decision with food?
I think the first time was when I probably had a breakdown, like really cried, and was really loving to myself, and was like, right, I need to help myself. I need to really change some things, and so I'm going to make myself a realistic plan. I'm not going to put myself into an extreme diet. And I was an all or nothing person. I think that was the main thing, where I had that breakdown and I realised the importance of not being that all or nothing, that there is a medium way to living, and you don't need to be, I'm eating all the foods today and then I'm not eating any foods tomorrow, I'm not eating any of those foods tomorrow, but just being in the middle.
Yeah, I love that concept. That's something that I talk about a lot. I refer to it as transformation light switch syndrome, where the light switch is either on or off, and we have to find that middle ground where I always recommend almost like an experimental mindset of let's, low pressure, and let's just take this one step at a time and collect data, and we make little fine-tuning tweaks here and there, but take that pressure off ourselves around food and around our transformation. So, Nicola, let's say, I've got a lot of listeners that deal with this weight loss battle, and there are several people that are, morbidly obese. They're in a situation where they've eaten themselves into a very unhealthy situation. So what would you say would be just a few of the initial steps, or how can we kick off the process for that sort of individual that needs to gain control over emotional eating?
So there's several tools and different things work for different people, but I would say as a start is looking at what's causing the triggers. What are the triggers behind the eating? Are you doing it after a stressful day at work? is it that you're feeling? What are the feelings? It's sort of put down the food and feel those feelings. Because until we actually know what these feelings are, these emotions are that are driving us to do things, then we can't really deal with the underlying causes. So it could be, for me, a lot of the time I was eating because I felt lonely and I felt fear, and so it was just, oh, this is a distraction. So first of all, looking at what am I really, why am I doing this? And then once you identify that, thinking what is a healthy alternative? I think it's really hard to say to ourselves, okay, just stop doing this ritual. For me, the whole making a cake thing every night was a ritual. It was, okay, I'm going to go and buy the ingredients, because I'd say to myself, I'm not going to do it the next day. So sometimes I'd bin the ingredients and then re-buy them. So I'd make sure I had the ingredients. And then I would go through the preparation of putting the food into the blender and turning the pot with the cake and the spoon. It was this whole ritual. So to just say to myself, right, I'm not going to do that. That was me in a unconscious way of trying to really nurture myself. But it wasn't healthy for me. In fact, it was very violent for me, because overloading yourself with sugar and flour and then being sick is the most violent thing you could probably do to yourself. So it was like, okay, what can I do? And it was like, well, I'm going to subscribe to a movie channel, or I'm going to make sure that I call a friend or see a friend, or I'm going to buy some new audiobooks and go for walks. And giving yourself lots of choices. One of the first things I say to people is, write a list of all the things you can do inside the house as an alternative, and all the things you can do outside, because sometimes we don't have the energy to go outside the house. So inside the house, it could be, well, I need to sort out all the photos of holidays you've been on, or other things, family events. I'm going to sort out the photos. Or this room I can declutter, or I can have a bath, I can give myself a massage, I can watch documentaries, I can read books. Like having loads of options, like I can cook healthy food and freeze it into portions, something you can do inside the house. And then have a list of things that you can do outside of the house, whether that's all the different kinds of exercise, new classes, learning things. You can also do online courses indoors as well. And so having a list of all these things, then you just ask yourself, okay, I'm not going to binge, I'm not going to overeat. What on this list could I do instead? So that's that. And then if you do break your pattern, if you do end up overeating, not saying to yourself, well, I may as well then just stuff myself because of this or because of that. Just saying to yourself, okay, I've made a mistake, I'm human, I'm going to learn from it. Maybe these foods aren't right or good for me at the moment. So until I'm in a better, perhaps, emotional state, I'm going to avoid those foods. And let me learn from this, let me love myself anyway. It's the hardest thing in the world to love yourself when you've done the exact thing that you promised yourself you wouldn't do. But when you can do that, it changes everything. Because we didn't choose to have this. And I really believe that. It's not our fault. We didn't choose to have this, just like alcoholics don't choose to be addicted to alcohol. People don't choose to have eating disorders. It's something that we've learned probably as a young age. It's something that we've learned as a way to cope, as a way to get through life, as a way to deal with our emotions, to deal with stress. So beating ourselves up on top of that is only going to make the problem worse, or it's going to stay the same. So when we can actually learn to love ourselves through that, then this is where we can have those amazing transformations, and we can start again fresh the next day, or even start the day again. You can start the day again anytime. Just because you maybe over ate at breakfast or lunch doesn't mean that you have to continue in that cycle.
Now, along this line, I've got a question I'm really interested in getting your feedback on. With one of the strategies I have people implement when I'm working with them in a group or one-on-one basis is we use a system that I call a cheat bank, where they can have meals where they go off their game plan, or they have a treat or whatever, but it's kind of thought out in advance. It's a birthday, it's a date night. Do you feel like the person who's dealing with emotional eating, I mean, is it is it better if they are planning that, if they are going to go off their plan, if they're going to eat a few extra calories, if it's